Hello
Okay.
and welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery programming series for our current exhibition, The Nexus of Art and Health, curated by Sienna Brown. Today, we are thrilled to present artist Laura Vinnedge. So in just a moment, Laura is going to chat with us about her artwork. Just to let you all know, if you would like captions, you can press on the closed caption icon. Everyone is in listen only mode, so if you have questions, go ahead and pop that into the chat. And to make yourself comfortable, if you'll pop into that chat and let us know where you're tuning in from, that would be fantastic. Also, we are presenting from different places, so if bandwidth fluctuates and anyone kind of pops in and out, I promise we'll keep going. Bear with us, and thank you in advance for hanging tight. All right, the rest is with you, Laura.
Thank you, Kat. I'm set to go. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming today. I can't see you, but I'm really glad you're here. Thank you, Kat, for setting this up and all you do for Ohio Arts Council and Ohio Artists. And I want to express my appreciation to curator Sienna Brown for her vision for putting together such a timely exhibition. And also express my appreciation for the diversity of voices and practices of the other artists in the exhibition. I'm honored to be amongst you. I'm going to give you just a little background, and nothing is happening here. I am not going forward.
And you click on the screen?
I can click on the screen.
All right.
There, okay. But it's going.
Take your time, it's fine. If you want
to. I usually do my up and down. I don't understand how to make it move.
Try left and right and see if that works for you.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Up and down, left and right.
If all else fails, I can go ahead and go through your slides for you.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the next slide. I'm sorry, it's doing nothing here. We thought we had escaped that, right? Anyway, so I'm going to speed up here. A little background per Kat's request. I am coordinator of, I've been on medical leave for 3 semesters and I'm returning. I'm very happy to say in January to resume my service as coordinator of painting and drawing at the Myers School of Art in at the University of Akron. And if you go to the next slide, more background. I received my BFA in painting at the University of Notre Dame. I am not Catholic. I'm not a huge football fan. I just wanted to go to a research rather than a art school. I did a BS at a Bachelor of Science in Art Education. I do kind of like BS though. At the University of Western Michigan, or Western Michigan University. And before Myers, I've been there since 1999. I taught at Ball State University, which is in Indiana. And I also coordinated exhibition and outreach programs at Jay County Arts Council, which is this small rural community in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. And it was just like a fabulous experience. And my first job out of school was teaching at a small community college nearby, Lake Michigan College. So, Kat, I want to cover just 2 things from my background that I think really have an impact on my work and might help you connect some dots as we move through some of the transformations and evolutions that my work go through. And the first is a connection to nature. Other than 3 years in Guelph, Ontario, Canada, my parents always lived on or near water and close to woods. And we were always out in it. And I developed at a very young age a deep reverence for nature, nature as a playground, nature as a laboratory, nature as an academy, and nature as a place or a space to repair, and recenter. And that's a little shout out to Susan Danko as well. The second thing, and you will see nature very much in my later work, which is why I have it in there. Um, I'm not religious. I'm going back. You don't have to go back, but I'm not religious. But I am in awe and humbled by the nuanced elegance and overwhelming power of nature, and the complex mechanisms and cause and effects that are found in nature. And that really comes back to my later work. The second thing from my background that I think really influences my work, has had a big impact, is my family, go figure. But I come from a really huge family, and there's this really huge age span in my family. My parents were in their 40s when they had me, and my oldest brother is almost 18 years older than me. And it made for amazing dinner conversations. My father was, an old school fiscal Republican. I had one brother that served in the Marines, one brother that's kind of a gearhead. My sisters that you see in the middle ground on the right of your screen were musicians. And there was just a wide variety of personalities. I really grew up I feel like I grew up with my two brothers in the lower left-hand corner, because by the time I was kind of conscious and aware, most of my brothers and sisters were gone. But they came back for dinners all the time, and they brought with them their colleagues and friends and artists and gearheads and other musicians and roadies. And dinner discussions were a time for, robust exchanges. And, there was a display of just like a wide range of diverse opinions, sometimes conflicting opinions. And I adored everybody at the table. I adored all of the perspectives. And so I was kind of forced naturally to question everybody's litany in search of my own. Right. You can go for it. Sorry. And that kind of led to like the only continuum that you'll see throughout this presentation in the evolution of my work, is that almost all of my work has a socio-political framework. And it really truly is what holds all my work together, as just about everything else changes through it. On the left is a painting. I'm not going to delve deep. I'm going to skim because there's just too many social political frameworks to discuss. So I'm just going to describe and title, and you can figure things out. So on the left is politics, a drawing done during George Sr.'s invasion of the Gulf. And on the right is, I have notes here, bisphenol. It's a detail that you'll see. It's a chemical, and you'll see that later in my work on chemical reactions. So we need a word. Thank you. I'm doing watercolors here because I was pursuing a degree that wasn't in the fine arts, and watercolors were convenient. So this is called "Don't Worry, Be Happy," which was a popular song during Bush's senior run for the presidency. You can go ahead. I was fortunate enough to spend some time in Cairo and Luxor, Egypt, and this is called nitrochema. And nitrochema was the first artificial fertilizer that was used after the completion of the Aswan Dam. And this is also impacted by my experience, or an experience that I had in Egypt. And this is called "Do You Love Me Now That I Can Dance?" But it's also known, and maybe you can figure out the meaning from this, it's also known as I have to read this, the Egyptian New Year's Eve demolition dance party. So you can go forward. So the first transition that breaks that continuum of the other aspects of my work is my move from watercolor to oils. And so on the left, you see a watercolor, a detail of Driven by Demons Within, I believe, about a friend's internal identity struggles. And on the right, you see a detail of reconstructing the subject, which is part of this is history, which is part of the reconstructing subject that we're going to be talking about soon. Thank you okay. And this is a huge watercolor. This is a 60 by 40 sheet of D'Arches 300-pound cold press paper. So you can imagine how large this is. And I was thinking about, this is just before I went to graduate school, I was thinking about the power of the gaze, and as in GAZE, and who looks and who is looked upon. And this is titled Mike, Angelo, David, and Dick. So forward. So when I got to graduate school, this is my shift to oils. I'm still thinking about the power of the gaze, and but I'm taking the advice of the graduate school faculty that I had to switch to oils to be taken seriously. So this is my very first oil painting, with what, kind of what I felt was like a cluster of kind of stereotypical buff men, kind of beautiful objects in my heterosexual eyes. And you can kind of see the watercolor washes and the influence of that. And I was also interested in the next slide topic, which I was also interested in language, the power of language. And so I did this. These are an example of a series that I did called Inversions. And so I would take quotes from philosophers and religious scripts and governmental documents, and I would just simply flip the pronouns in them. So this is a Aristotle quote in the background, and in my mind, I was flipping, the pronouns of, okay, I am gone. Okay, I was flipping the pronouns of male and females to, in my mind, kind of recognize the absurdity of thinking that words don't matter. It's as simple as that. Okay. And then I moved on to reconstructing the subject, which is a series of 15 door-sized panels, perfect size for figurative work. And basically what I was doing is I was creating overt or obvious meaning through the personifications, or so these are all personification paintings, and they're human embodiments of abstract ideas. So you have, I think, empathy on the left, or I'm sorry, no, I can't remember what it's called. I'm sorry. And I don't have apathy, not empathy, apathy. Just, and I can't remember what the middle one's name, and the one on the right is faith comforts the doubt. And you can go forward. These paintings they're all personifications, but they're also injected with covert signifiers. They're not so covert. They seem pretty obvious. But some of those signifiers are, it is the men that are passive, that just appear, and it's the women who are active. The women are all clothed, the male is unclothed. The women dominate the text in their painting, while the men are dominated by the text. And if you go forward, this is a slide that was supposed to be edited out, what was part of the original series, but I wanted to share it because it was recycled. I think so many of us do this. This became part of a series of paintings called Packages that were about pumping up titillation by diffusing or suffusing or suppressing information. So onto the next slide and back to those signifiers. Um, all of the men are the same figures. They're anonymous and they're all the same model. And all of, you go forward, they're always looking away. They never return your gaze. And the women are, if you go forward, they're individuals, they're identified, and often there's an implied narrative or a story behind them. So that's that. This is a triptych that's part of Take a Picture It Lasts Longer. And that just comes from, back in my day, it was kind of a snarky remark that a group of young teenage girls would say to gawking teenage boys to kind of deflect their gaze. So if you go on to the next slide, obviously there's an appropriation. This is a full panel on the left of the triptych, and then an outsized detail of the small man in a red turban in the middle, an obvious appropriation of Jan van Eyck's painting called Man in a Red Turban. And so I was really thinking about power. It's still, about the gaze, who looks and who doesn't look and who's looked upon. So it's still all about power relationships and power plays. And, I was just kind of thinking about what was going on in Northern Europe during Jan's time. And we know about the rise of the mercantile class and, how bolts of cloth were sold and other things were sold as well. To the next slide. This is, I think it's just called Take a Picture It Lasts Longer. And I just really love the self-satisfied look on another appropriation from a Delatour portrait from the 19th century. But just a further exploration on looking and being looked at. And just a detail. So obviously some of these are drawings. I used a lot of gesso and graphite and Conti crayons and water in these. So forward for the last one. This is Hysteria, still part of the Take a Picture It Lasts Longer series, a 2-panel oil painting. And this is Hysteria, Jericho's Mad Woman. So again, another appropriation on the left there. You can kind of see her behind. There's actually writhing snakes that don't really come out in the kind of phallic snakes that come out in the left panel, but you can't really see them here. So next panel. So when I started teaching at Ball State University in Indiana, I kind of continued on a somewhat similar fashion with a grant-supported project that I did with 7 female painters there. And they had to do, you can go to the next slide. They had to do a lot of research on, they spent about a month looking at videos, mass media, fine arts imagery, and I wanted them to see if they could find any tropes or stereotypes or cliches in representation of women. And I was going to do this with men, but I left Ball State before that happened. So I just wanted you to know that. And they came up with 7. And they were bitch, virgin, toy, victim, ornament, service, and servant, and incubator. And so they were charged with doing a painting of themselves on the left is how they saw themselves. So this on the left is a portrait of Rachel. And then I did the stereotype that they found, a drawing of them, which is in the middle. And then I did a portrait of each of them. And so if you go to the next slide. So this is Rachel as servant. And I added a detail because this is the time where I'm starting to really just like pile on information. And so She is a mother, she is a cleaner, she is, all that domestic stuff that is tying her down. Seems to be kind of overtly, obviously expressed in this image. There's on the right panel, if you look all the way over to the right, you can almost slightly discern Jan van Eyck's Arnolfini wedding as the border. And so that runs all the way around. The Hoover in the background with the hose wrapped around the stilettoed legs are from another artist who I panicked and was Googling and trying to find, but I cannot cite, and I apologize for that, but another appropriation. But you're seeing grommets, largely drawing materials, but grommets pierced through the image, and kind of the ties that bind are there as well. And the next slide is the portrait of Rachel, the way I saw her, which is as beyond her years wise, loving parent with a dear respect for her links, and just a whip smart woman. And I think there's just a detail that follows. Yeah. And then just to quickly run through the next slide, some of the other stereotypes and portraits, but I mostly stick to the stereotypes. So on the left is bitch, and the portrait of this woman is called Fuck Barbie. And so these are about, I don't know, they're about 54 inches tall. So you can get a sense of their format. And the next slide is incubator. And, all the pomegranates, teeming fish, eggs. Again, the ties are everywhere. You see Venus of Willendorf as her border. So it's all about fecundity. And then there's just a couple more details of some of the other panels. This, I believe, is toy. And so whoops. Okay. Yeah, this is toy. And so there's the border on this one is lounging women from Eng's Turkish bath. And then there are all these little symbols that are, what's the formula? It's, there's the formula of silicone everywhere. So everything's rubbery and silicone and playful like a toy. And the final one is just ornament. And so you have the three graces, you have skeletons, you have looking in mirrors, and the border on this one was the dumb blonde of the time, Jenny McCarthy, circling around. So these are, whenever I'm not knee deep in a larger project, I am just kind of in my studio, just, doing smaller pieces and just constantly painting and working. At this time, I was obviously really working with the figure. And so, trying to work my way through ideas. So I just wanted to share those with you. Those are kind of a joyful part of my time, actually. And if you move forward to the next, it's just an example of the same thing. And these are not my paintings. At this time, I was going to Italy, and for some reason, when I walked into the Uffizi and saw a lot of the proto-Renaissance paintings there, I was just dumbstruck by their sense of freshness and the design elements and the flatness and the linear qualities and their accessibility in regards to reading the image. And so you have Duccio on the left. These are just Madonnas from some specific place, but it's Duccio on the left and a Cimabue on the right. And so when I came back, you can move forward, from Italy, I'm still doing kind of searching through smaller works, and But you can see, and you can just go through these at your own pace. There's 5 of them. These are smaller studies. I'm just getting really specific, or a little more specific, about gesturing, and I'm not using gold gilt or anything, but I'm starting to like be really aggressive with my intentions and my invitation to decipher, I think. And so these kind of led to a series called, the next slide is Tool Worship. And so this was a big series, and it's tool worship. I'm a tool worshiper, but the tool worship was about the comparisons between, the similarities between converging characteristics of belief systems that are based on fact and those that are based on belief, and how they vacillate with new, they're impacted by the invention of new tools and perspectives, and how things are recorded and delineated and calculated and defined. So I'm just looking at different systems, and so this is aesthetics, and so you can, and these are large too. They're between 5 and 6 feet. I can't remember exactly. This, as you might guess, is philosophy, with the blind Tiresias in there, or my version of the blind Tiresias philosopher in there. I'm thinking about, what are you doing when you're on your toes? You're looking for something or reaching for something. So there's torches, there's, candles, there's phallic symbols. And the next one is industry. So kind of like co-opting and manipulating the elements. And the next one is politics, like one of the biggest competitive games. And we're number one, right? Or we want to be number one. I'm trying to get my there. And this is physics. And so I think there's just a couple details of some paintings I did not include. This one was religion. And so you can see here that I'm doing oils over collage, and I'm really working with a lot of different surfaces, and using mediums to change, like the shine that you can see on the left, with resins and different kinds of oils, and the washes in the back. And you can see the collage of some of the models that were posing, doing the hand gestures for me. And so that's religion, and this is medicine on the left, and a detail of physics on the right. And then the next body of work is called Gargantuan, bigger, better, faster, stronger. And this was inspired by the similarities that I saw reading the 1543 book by Rabelais called Gargantua and Pantagruel. And the book is all about these descriptions of people striving to be the richest, the fattest even. There's these amazing descriptions, but, it all really boiled down to the similarities in that book of everybody striving to be the est, or the best of something, the fastest, the richest, etc. And contemporary American society, the obsession to be better, I guess, and to be the best. And I guess they just kind of saw it as a pissing contest. I hope I don't offend anybody by that, but yeah, this is all about pissing contest. So this is called Push More, Care Less. And if you go to the next slide, this is an in-progress studio image where I am obviously looking for, large monumental figures that are excessively striving, striding, flexing, and each of them have a small panel that you can see second from left that accompanies them. And if you go to the next shot, you can see that the panel, this painting is called Want More, and you can't see the S at the bottom going up on the right side of the thin panel, but the panel says Want More, Shame Less. And so I was interested in how you can take the second pair of the verb and adverb and turn it into adjective that maybe reflects the futility of such pissing contests. So you can say want more, shame less, or you can say want more, shameless. It's shameless. And you can go forward. I think there were 15 panels, and there were over 10,000 teacup screws screwed into these, because I really thought it was, for me, it was reflective of it's those little tiny insidious hooks that kind of pull you into a way of thinking. But this one is actually called, if you go to the next slide, this is just a detail of it and another panel. My dad's bigger than your dad. So it's really all about, I don't want to say a religious pissing contest, but it's a contest. So again, I'm starting to go back to the muse. I'm sorry, I'm timing myself, everybody, so I stay on track. And this is portraits of the artist as. So they're basically portraits of friends that feel the same way I do about a lot of things. And this is a portrait of me as Steve Levy, and it's called La La La, and it's about art theory, the density of art theory. And the next slide is the portrait of me as Angie White, and this is called Buy More Waste. So it's about excessive consumerism. I've lost the screen. Okay. So this is transition number 2 for me as part of the evolution, where I'm moving from descriptive exteriors to increasingly abstract interiors. So that's Jericho's Madwoman, a detail on the left, and Monsanto on the right. And so to move forward, because we have a lot to go through, this is, I went to Chimayo, New Mexico, and was overwhelmed by the milagros at the healing sands, the sacred healing sands at Chimayo. And people would go in and put up all these little, if they had a broken arm, there'd be a milagro, a little tiny shape of an arm. And so I was thinking about body parts. And I, if you go to the next slide, just a detail. So I kind of got obsessed with body parts. And so that became a remove away from the outside of the bodies. This is called Transcendence. And this is images from an 18th century medical journal. And if you go to the next slide, this is Hoyle's Rules. I also, at the same time, I went to the sacred sands of Chimayo, New Mexico. I went to Las Vegas because I wanted 2 extreme American experiences. And so a lot of the paintings coming up are in the shape of playing, like a deck of cards, playing cards. And there's dice, there's all the gambling accoutrements kind of, injected into these paintings. And so this is Hoyle's Rules, which also has to do with gambling. And this is yes. And another Hoyle's Rules is maybe, if you move forward, this is another part of, these are all part of a series I did called Synecdoche, since I was looking at body parts. synecdoche is a part representing a whole or vice versa. So this is party politics, and this is see no evil. The next slide is speak no evil, and the final slide is hear no evil. And you can see from the slide that I'm literally at this point gluing down patterns of playing cards and painting on top of them, and using transparencies in the lower left-hand corner just above the dark rectangle. You can see one of the cards coming through. So everything's a gamble, everything's a chance. And then this is still imbued with gambling accoutrements and are obviously body parts. But I'm starting to think about relationships between macro stellar systems and micro biological systems. And this is where I start thinking about chemicals too, because the left is named Monsanto and the right painting is named Pfizer. So that's a cue to where I was thinking for many of you, I'm sure. And then another transition was my move from, kind of straight up oils to oil and latex combinations, which is bringing us towards the work more like the work that's in the show. And so you can see on the left that, as I started that transition, there's still a lot of oils and a lot of glazing and a lot of sculpting and, and then just the flat out dripping and not so much pouring here yet. So that, I've started easing into that combination. And on the right, I'm just full tilt playing with latex and kind of going crazy with it. And the painting that is this part of, you'll see later, is like almost too heavy for me to lift. So again, back to those macrostellar and microbiological similarities. This is a painting called Pulled String Theory. And so this is a combination. This is where I'm really starting to love the use of latex, which is basically just house paint. It's less expensive. It actually stands up really well. I do sometimes put isolating layers in to really secure things down. But I love the combination of being able to describe and glaze and do those kinds of things and then just put the plastic on. So the next slide is called Conscious. And that is, I got to wrap this up, don't I? Okay, that is Conscious spelled with science. And we're going to come back to that later because this is going to be a skim rather than a dive. So if you go on to the next. So I do dive right deep into the chemical warfare and how they're insidious, they're everywhere, and they're impacting our air, our lives, our bodies. And so this is, I lost what this is. This is PCBs, and I won't go through, all of these are just named chemicals. This is, I don't know what this is. I don't have the name of this one, but two different chemicals. And the next one is PHA. And these are basically all just carcinogen, some sort of carcinogen. It usually has to relate with plastics. And I could tell you what each one of these chemicals are and where they're found and where they are in your house. But basically, it's just, covering the chemical warfare battle that we unwittingly engage in. And the next, that's just a detail. So you can see there, I think that's a good example of the combinations of oils and latex there. And the next painting is Chemical Warfare Bisphenol or BPA. You saw a detail of that earlier. It's the metal. People are pretty familiar with BPA by now. It lines our cans, and there's a little bit of collage, oil, lots of latex on this painting. The next slide shows, oh, this is the plastic. This is the one where it's just like almost straight up. I just call it plastic because I'm basically talking about all of these chemicals that go into consumers' objects that are largely, but not always, plastics. But the next slide is a studio shot of work in progress, and you'll see the two paintings on the right in the next shot. And this is called phthalates. And these diptychs all of these panels are about 3x3, sometimes 4x4, just to give you a size of these. And these are very similar in part to what you've seen, if you have seen the shows, the work in the show. So there's a detail, or there's a right panel next. You can see that some of those blue dots actually have the chemical names in them, and you can see how they're sitting on top of the otherwise oil painted painting image. And in the next slide, I think you can really see the three-dimensionality of these. Are almost sculptural, they're heavy sculptural beasts. By the time I get done layering and piling in all this information with the different strategies of paint manipulation. The next slide is the beauty of the latex. How can you not want to get in there and play around? And the painting that came from it. The next slide. This slide is HCB, another chemical, so still part of that series. And this is a painting that was done when my mother-in-law, my dear mother-in-law Susan, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And I work on a lot of paintings at the same time. And if you go to the next slide, it's another. I was doing these hearts that were being pulled apart and or were being vacated. Thinking about her. My husband was out in Colorado with her. But if you go to the next slide, the painting on the left that we started really increasing the pace on, Conscious, has a history, right? It's actually been shown at Rife before with the New Narratives show, curated by the curator of the Columbus Museum of Art. While I'm doing all of these chemical warfare things, that's a couple of these paintings were hanging in my studios, and I was just overwhelmed by the insidious nature of Susan's cancer, and that it's pancreatic. She really didn't have a chance, and just how it takes over and it grows. And so I just built upon these paintings, and you'll see the paintings that are in the show, layer by layer on top of other paintings. So you can go forward through the next. So these are just, some of the paintings in the show. There are 6 of them. Total of 6 of them, and they are I think I finalized with they're each designed to sit by themselves, but they are also part of what I call a 6-pack, because 6-tick septicked sounds pretty strange. So this brings you up to the date in the show. And then very quickly, I was going to talk a little bit about, this is called runoff. After dealing with the body, I wanted to go into another area, so I dealt with the hydrosphere. And so this is our sea anemone with bacilli and microbeads. And the next one is nudibranch, which is kind of mollusk. They're egg ribbons, and along with bacilli and microbeads. And the final is, the next painting is, a detail of the buildup of the work, which I don't know if you really see from a distance from in the large. So I do like to include. And then there's another anemone with bacilli and microbeads. And I was going to talk a little bit about my residency, my Ohio Arts Council residency for 3 months in um, Provincetown and how wonderful it is. But I'm going to zoom forward. This is my studio at Provincetown. Um, and that's how close we were to the lake. But this is work in progress that I started there. And this is eutrophication, and I was dealing still with the hydrosphere and thinking about how, looking at images from all over the place of how nitrogen has caused all these algae blooms everywhere. And so this, and you go forward, this is work in process, but my layering will be kind of the same, going back between nitrogen, raining down and back in pores. And this is suffocation and work in progress. And I started another one there too. And if you go forward, I stencil a lot. You can see that the dark circles here appear in the next, and I'm working from the background to the foreground. And so the background isn't done there, but in the next slide, I show another thing that I do, which is less typical, and I do solvent pours. So I lay down a glaze, I lay down a layer of paint, and I drop solvent into it to get the next slide. The impact in the effect in the upper left-hand corner of kind of like this mottled, dappled, exactly, view. And I think this slide is also a really good example of how I'm moving through this unfinished painting from the back. And it takes me layers and layers to get even the background done. So I'm done with the background, and I'm moving forward next to the middle ground and the foreground, layer by layer by layer. Unfortunately, I'm not able to work with oils, so those paintings will be on hold. How do I get back to normal? I won't feel normal. I'm so happy to go back to work, but I won't feel normal till I'm back in my studio. So I'm switching to watercolors. Much like Glenn Holland switched from from oils to egg tempera, and I'm working with molecular based chemo drugs, images of chemo drugs, and T cells and things like that in a chemical kind of accord, which will be more positive. So I'm dealing with watercolors and I'm dealing with the body. I've come full circle. Sorry about going over. Sorry about talking so fast too.
Did great. No sorries necessary. So folks, that important for you to know, if you want to see more of Laura's work, you can catch her. We'll put the link into the comments on the YouTube video as well, but lauravinnedge.com is a great place to go to see more. I'm going to stop sharing, and I will pin you so that everybody who has questions can ask them. But while we're waiting for folks to ask questions, Laura, I think it's really, it was wonderful to see the progression of your work and such strong narrative within it. I'd love for you to just chat a little bit about, you talked about getting back into the studio. So tell us a little bit what your studio experience is today, and then tell us what your dreamy standard studio day is like, if you can take us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, my studio practice is null and void. My doctors have said that I cannot work with oils. Hence I bought all the materials. I went to watercolors. So you're going to laugh at this, but my ideal studio experience is what I had in Provincetown, where, I had no responsibilities at all. I was away from my home. It was hard to be away from my loved ones, but basically every day I could walk to my studio and I could work. And it was glorious. You would hope everybody would be able to experience that, whether it's in your studio or what you want to do every day, to be in control like that. But it is about physically exploring all the stuff that's like running through my head all the time. I'm an avid reader, and I'm just like, it's hard, and it's been increasingly difficult not to just spin out and go down rabbit holes all the time. And the studio is just like a really wonderful place to explore, I think, in a more healthy way, than mentally spinning out.
Wonderful. So you showed us a little bit of your process and the deep layering that happens. I'm curious if you can chat a little bit about how you came to that nearly collage type process. Clearly it was built over time, but if you could pull it back and help someone that is exploring that, understand that kind of transition into it.
Are you talking about like the collaging of like putting together of different materials, or how they're sticking things on a panel, or
Yes.
Yeah, it was kind of by whatever means necessary. I started working on panels, and you can drill into panels, you can glue onto panels, you can do anything you want. And I also became really curious and interested in like the inherent visual currency of a lot of materials, and what what does masking tape or what does Gorilla Tape bring to a painting when you put it on, or to an image. And so it kind of became one of those, I can try this. I have nothing to lose, and I like the fact that these signifiers kind of do the work, do some of the work for you as far as expressing an idea. And then I just, the transition to latex, and I have to play with the viscosity. You could, if you just pour it out of a fresh can, so it was almost like being a cook in a kitchen. Just like the paints that I really liked or wanted to use, I had to like, is it a half lid open or a full lid open for 2 days, or what I had to figure out that viscosity. But that came about, my switch to or my incorporation of latex came about serendipitously. It was just, somebody dropped off a lot of latex at our school. I was coordinating the program, and said, sure, bring it in. And the students went nuts. And it was free paint. There was a ton of it. They had nothing to lose. So their experimentation went through the roof. It was wonderful. And then I couldn't use that paint, of course, but I found, my husband and I also, he's an artist and he uses latex. We found this store that is no longer with us anymore, unfortunately, but you could go buy mist tints, we could go spend $20 and fill our car with latex. And like I said in that one slide, you just open up all these lids and there's all this, this amazing color. But it really came about from someone wanting to donate a bunch of paint to Myers School of Art students. So.
Isn't that amazing how chance can inspire?
Yeah.
That's great. So we have a question. With the pieces that you have in the Nexus of Art and Health exhibition, and you notice that you allow us to see the edges of the canvas. And many folks have said, this is where the secrets of the painting are kind of revealed. Is there a reason why you choose to leave the sides of the canvas available for us to have that discovery? Could you chat a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's distinctly purposeful in that, I try often, don't always achieve, but I try often to have my process align with my concept. And so I wanted people to be able to see the layering and the growth, the rogue growth or the cancerous growth or the whatever growth, that there was a ton of information, there was a lot happening to get to that surface description, as you will. It was very, very, I mean, sometimes it was just like, I don't like that color, I'm going to try something else, I'm going to pour something else on it. But it was largely trying to make that alignment between process and concept.
Wonderful. We have a question from Mary Beth, who starts with a comment that says, what an amazing progression from outside figure into the figure. Crazy beautiful. Will you keep working from the inside, or do you intend to revisit the outside?
I'm not sure about the outside. I'm certainly, with my next body of work, that's going to be these watercolors, I'm still going micro, biological. So I'm still dealing with the body. But there's a freedom that comes from the ability to abstract at will without, and describe. You can really describe molecules and describe phalanges and T cells and things like that. But there's a freedom that comes for me when I'm not trying, especially to describe or get closer to at least a hint of a description of somebody I know, or somebody I care about. And almost all my models are people I know and care about. So I'm not sure that I'll be going back soon. For now, I'm not. I have no intention. Sorry, Mary Beth.
Mary Beth said that she feels like she's been privy to a long journey and its outcome. Thanks so much. So I would like for you to maybe close us out with your take on your participation within this exhibition. If you can articulate what that means however you'd like to describe that.
Well, I really enjoyed my meeting with Sienna and hearing about her pillars, and because there was a little trepidation about, I didn't think anyone knew that I had cancer necessarily, but there was a little trepidation about being in a Six show or something like that, or not that I wouldn't have considered it, but I was a little crazy at the time anyway. But when she started explaining kind of her pillars and how broad a spectrum she was painting, but within that broad spectrum, she wanted to have pockets of specificity. I was just really impressed by how she was looking at it. And then, unfortunately, only seeing the show digitally, I was blown away at the range and experiences and practices of all these artists, but the range of experiences and how people were thinking about whether it was COVID related, whether it was some sort of psychological or mental issue, or just some straight up sickness or disease. There's a little bit of everybody, or for everybody, or by everybody. So I was like instantly thrilled to be included in it. And then again, just like the media range, the sculpture, there's the materials that people are manipulating to express their ideas. I think is pretty hot in this show. It's pretty cool.
I agree. I agree with your statement.
Ditto.
I think that's a really great wrapping place. And for those of you that are able to come to the gallery and see these works in person, Laura did a great job of giving us details that give really great hints at it, but there's truly nothing that compares to being, a few inches away from them and getting to see that depth, and how it forces your eye to play between understanding great visual depth and this kind of flattening and graphic quality of it. among all of the other phenomenal work within the show. So thank you again, Laura, for the generosity of your time and talent to share your work with us. Thank you to Sienna for putting together these phenomenal artists, to the other artists, and of course to the Governor's Office, Legislature, the Ohio Arts Council's board, who supports the Ohio Arts Council, this great space, and of course, Ohio artists. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.